guys. I am making dinner. What is today? It is the 13th of December. January. I'm Tanya. I know that much. It is Wednesday, the 13th of January. And yeah, I'm here to do a tag. I was tagged by Doris over at Aldi Books. Thank you, Doris, for tagging me. In this tag called Hindsight is 2020 Reader Tag. It was originally created by Aaron over at Aaron Go Read. I have been a subscriber of Aaron's for a year and a half, maybe 2 years. Time is, a blur. So, anywho, she has a lovely channel, so go check her out. So basically this tag is about reading and how long I've been reading and what have you. So I think it's a really lovely tag because it gets you to know a little more about the booktuber, the person behind the reader of the books. So let's just jump into it, shall we? Number 1, what were you like as an early and learning reader? So I've been aware of books ever since I can remember. My grandmother watched me when I was very young, and I have a very vivid memory of her reading a particular book to me. The book was colorful and pink. Up until about 2 years ago, I didn't know what that book was that she read to me. But again, it was pink, it was colorful, and it was a very strong memory. And so we were at a used book sale because, yes, we are those people. I love used book sales. It goes back to when I was a kid and my grandparents would pick me up on Saturday mornings, and we would go to garage sales hunting for books. My grandfather was a book lover, book collector, yes. So we were at this book sale, and I was at the children's picture books because I collect children's picture books. And this particular vintagey one caught my eye. And then it was as if this whole memory just flashed before me. And the book that my grandmother had been reading me in my memory was that one. So I bought it, of course. It is Welcome to Upsy Downsy Land. It is dusk. Actually, the sun has set here, so the light is not good. But this is super colorful. Take my word for it. It is very 70s. It was published in 1969. And this is the story of the Upsy Downsies. They meet their counterparts who live in Downsy Land. So we have the Upsy Downsies and the Downsies. It's very 70s. So we have Pudgy Fudgy, Downy Dilly. You get the idea. Sorry, it's so dark. I loved this book. Loved this book so much. So perhaps it was this book alone that made me the reader I am, because my grandmother would read this book to me, and here I am today, the avid reader I am. So this is maybe a little clue into the type of books that I liked as a kid. My favorite show was H.R. Pufnstuf. So again, it was the 70s. It was surreal when I saw that book that day. It's just, I can't even describe it. It was bizarre. I could read. I loved the Frog and Toad books. We had the Scholastic book forms at school. We didn't have the book fairs like they do now. But we had the forms, and we would take the forms home, and you would have your parent write the check. Remember what a check was? You would write that for money. I love those. And I have these two surviving. These are old. So I have Ghosts and Crows and Things with O's. I remember loving this book because it would ask you these questions. Do you see any O's? And it was almost interactive. So that's one of them. And Owl at Home. Good old Arnold Lobel. Loved his books. And the classic Scholastic editions are quite endearing. So Scholastic book forms. More books would come into the house that way. My mother would give me books. She worked at a store that they had European clothing and jewelry, and they had kids' toys, like eclectic toys and books. And so she would get these wonderful books for me there in Britain. These are some of them that I have acquired through the years. This one's by illustrated by Molly Brett. Pipsqueak Spring Holiday. Oh, this lighting is so Pipsqueak Spring Holiday. A surprise for Dumpy. I think Dumpy was a squirrel. But these are charming. They're longer picture books. I remember reading them to my boys when they were young and plying them with snacks on the couch because, again, they're longer picture books. And they're not the kind of, quick satisfaction that some picture books can be. They're deeper stories. Yeah, and then my grandmother, she always had these Sunday school lesson type books that, or storybooks that she would get for me and read to me. And again, these were longer, and they were by Arch Books, which is a publisher that I have lots of these books. I loved the way they felt. Yeah, and who knew that I'd have a son named Benjamin? But that one survived. Oh, and then also the Frog and Toad. Did I mention those? The Frog and Toad books that I would read on my own. I also would read the And I Can Read books. These, I love these. The feel of them. There's something about books and the feel and the way the pages moved. I don't know. But this one was one of my favorite books, Arthur's Honey Bear. I would read this over and over and over and over. This is about Arthur and his sister Violet. Violet is having a yard sale, and she wants Arthur to sell his teddy bear. He does not want to sell his teddy bear, but she convinces him, and I think she buys the bear. I don't know. It was very traumatic in the story, I remember, to Arthur because he was selling his bear and then she bought it and was taking care of it and he wanted the bear. So, precious story. But I loved these kind of little early chapter books, you'd call them. Number 2, what book or book series really got you excited about reading as a kid? So I mentioned my mother worked at that store and they had beautiful editions of chapter books. So that's where I discovered Charlotte's Web, The Secret Garden, what else? Nancy Drew Mysteries, A Little House on the Prairie books, Caddy Woodlawn. I have a strong memory sense with how books felt in my hands, what the cover looked like and felt, if it was a shiny kind of book or I don't know. I can't describe that. It's just kind of a sensory thing for me. And she bought me a lot of books from this store. It was called Why Not? And that was a very special place. But I got a lot of books from there. New books. I love the feel of them. And to this day, I'm a spine breaker. It really makes my husband cringe. But I break the spine when I get a new book. I know. I'm sorry. The Witch in the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. That book in particular, I have a memory with reading under the stairs. We had a basement in the house that I lived when I was ages 2 to 12. And under the stairs was a little space, not very big, but perfect for little Tanya. I was little back then. And my mother, I don't know, she did the space for me or said, have at it. But that was my little reading nook. And I took my blankets and my pillows, and there was an outlet. So I had a lamp. I remember the lamp. And The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I have a very, very strong, vivid memory of sitting there with the lamp on, reading that book. And I had like a blanket or a curtain or some kind of fabric that covered the opening to this space. So it was just me in there. Very cozy. About a foot from the space was the washer dryer, so it was very loud when those were going. I got into high school. I didn't read as much, but the books that I did read were very young love, those little mass markets that had the cheesy covers on them. The time of afternoon specials on TV, so you had the, more heavier topics for teens. I loved books like that at the time. And then later in high school, I read all the Marion Chesney Regency romance books. I don't even know. I just discovered them on the library shelf. And Yeah, they were fantastic. Much older in college, I don't think I read much at all. I don't remember reading in college other than Bridges of Madison County, which I can't think, I'll have to look up when that book came out. But that book made me sob. That was one of the first books that affected me. It just kind of took over my emotions. And probably one of the first books that I finished in the wee hours. So I just kept reading The Bridges of Madison County. And by the end of it, I thought it was a real story. I mean, I knew it was fiction, but I was convinced that it was real somehow. And the next time I was at my grandparents' house, I went into his basement where he kept his books, a library of books. The whole basement of a 5-bedroom home was books, just stacks and stacks of books on shelves. And he had an exorbitant amount of National Geographics. And I went there because I thought that I would find reference to the guy who's in the Bridges of Madison County. You know, he's the photographer. Well, he wasn't there, so it was just a story. I was convinced. So, yeah, that book really impacted me. Has there been a person in your life, real or fictional, who inspired you to be a reader? So, for that, I'd have to say my grandfather, my maternal grandfather. At what point did you begin to identify as a reader? So, I don't know. I mean, I've just always been around books and reading. My grandfather was the one who was always with a book, reading a book, holding a book, with books. I mean, my mother read, my grandmother read, my dad, I don't remember reading when I was a kid. He would read to us like short stories, scary, spooky stories, Disney stories, out of little Disney storybooks. But him reading for fun, I don't remember seeing much of that. Well, I guess my grandfather, he was the biggest influencer. And, I mean, he taught me about first editions and rare books. And I learned so much more about books rather than just pick it up and read a story. That there were nonfiction books. Number 5, how has a reader shaped your life and your worldview? In high school, I wanted to be a social worker. I took a sociology class, and I was like, sign me up. This is what I want to do. I want to be with people. This is fascinating because people are different all around the world. And through my teacher, I somehow was connected then to a social worker in my city. Volunteered for a family that she worked with. I went to their house 2 times a week, and I read to them. And at some point, I wanted them to go to the library because the library was very important to me. I went to the library as early as I could and got a library card. I was always checking out books. I was always doing work at the library, homework, research, playing with the card catalog. Just the library was where it was at as far as I was concerned. So I felt like these kids needed to go to the library in order to live, apparently. So I drove them to the library. I got them library cards. I mean, you can't do that nowadays. I mean, I just took them in my car and we went to the library, and I think we were gone for like 2 hours. I think I had them 2 hours twice a week. I took their picture outside the library. I still have one picture, and they're both standing outside holding their library cards and a stack of books. We were on our way. We were just leaving. And it was so precious. I remember the girl's name was Crystal, and I don't remember the little boy's name. They were so dear, and I just felt like reading had to be part of their lives. Being a reader has really crossed into my work experience, my life, because when I was 24, I went to work for Borders Books, and it was a new location in Arlington, Virginia, and we opened the store. There were no books on the shelves, and that was very special. I met my husband there at Borders. We were both booksellers. I was in charge of the children's department, and he was in charge of history and poli-sci. And obviously that really affected my life because we've been married almost 25 years. Yeah, through the bookstore gig, I did the story time there. I planned the events. I met authors. We obviously in Arlington we had transient people from all over the world come through, in and out of DC area, and the people that would come in and the books that they would want. I was in tune with these books that I'd never heard of before and authors that I had no idea. Little by little, just kind of grew, and my knowledge and affinity for reading just was leaps and bounds from what it had been. And then when I had kids, I stopped working for 17 years, actually. But when my second son was a baby, I worked part-time a few nights a week at the library. I thought that a bookstore and a library were very similar. What could be different? But they are like night and day. At least my experiences were. I found myself reading more and buying more books. Tag someone whose reading history you want to know more about. So for that, I'm going to tag two people. I tagged Bree over at Call Me After Coffee. Bree is a breath of fresh air. She is such a sweetness on BookTube, and I would love to know her reading story. I also tagged Susan over at Road Reads. I think she would do this tag wonderfully. And it's all a stepping stone, and I find it fascinating. So if you do the tag, let me know. I'll come see. Take care.